Hello everyone, this is my first video in a Holy Paladin Warrior 2v2 TBC Arena series. I wanted to create this series to help Holy Paladin Warrior combos be a little bit more competitive in the TBC Arena scene. This first video is going to cover all the basic information you might be curious about, including gear, talents, and some general gameplay information. Just a little bit of info about myself and my partner. My main is Xtarzal, and my partner is Cupcake, and we're from the guild Mediocre on Benediction. We were both new to Arena in Season 1 and farmed a ton of games to learn how to play this comp. We came into the game with a pretty fresh slate and just tried to come up with a set of strategies that works for us. We peaked at 2300 at one point in Season 2, and we're hopeful that we just might reach Glad by the end of the season. With all that said, the information in this video is self-taught and what has worked for us. If you're not playing with a warrior, the information in this guide should help you make some decisions about what's best for you and your non-warrior partner. As you might have noticed from this rogue mage matchup playing in the background, a paladin's ability to enable the warrior is what makes this comp so strong. Paladins have a lot of tools that make up for warrior weaknesses, and that can make a warrior almost unstoppable. Combining this utility with the Paladin's ability to deal high instant cast burst damage is what we use to achieve success. This comp does have a lot of shortcomings. Classes with Purge or Spell Steal can be particularly difficult to deal with, but it is possible. Alright, so with all that out of the way, why don't we talk about gear. So I generally play with one of two different gearing setups. A Lambler build or an ornamented build. So the Lambler build focuses on full damage and a low Hodge cooldown by making use of the set bonus, while the ornamented build still packs a punch while giving more sustain from a combination of some ornamented pieces with tier 5 set bonus. So first up, you guessed it, is 9 Vuln. So while 9 Vuln can be purged, it's still a huge help against comps like Warrior Druid, since it can buy a lot of time if the warrior is locking you up with charges and pummels. You can also pop it before you bubble, to then bubble off the debuff if it does happen to backfire, even though it's pretty rare that it does. It also helps buy a lot of time against Rogue Mage if it's used at the right time, typically when a Rogue Mage is reopening on you after you've got out your initial pressure. But if you don't have access to 9 Vuln, it's not the end of the world. However, you'll probably have some situations where you might have lived if you did have access to it. Okay, so next up is either Talisman of the Breaker or Pendant of the Lost Ages. So these are both PvP necks that drop in PvE content. You can pick one of these up at the end of Heroic Blood Furnace or from Tidewalker and SEC. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. What you're really going after is the effect that these necks give. So the main deal with this item is that it gives you a similar benefit as improved concentration aura, which then frees up some talents that you can use elsewhere, as well as opening up your options to use different auras in Arena. For example, using Shadow Aura against a Warlock, or Frost Aura against Rogue Mage, or maybe even Devo against Warrior Druid when you're not being targeted. So next up is the Justice Bringer goggles. So these goggles are great if you're human and you have engineering. When you pair these with perception, you can break stealthies out almost every single game. But if you're not human or you don't have access to engineering, just use an appropriate helmet, whether that's a piece of tier gear or a PvP set piece. These also have a ton of crit on them, which is nice, but I value them most when on human. Also, don't forget, your stun resist metagem. So now we're going to start getting into some fringe classic items that you may or may not have. So I highly recommend these, but if you don't have them, it's not the end of the world. So the first of these items is Librum of Grace from AQ40. So this Librum is OP against comps where you have to dispel a lot, right? So it's really strong against warlocks, mages, sometimes druids. Since we tend to have mana issues, the 25 mana cost really adds up over time, right? So you're saving 25 mana per cast. It's really going to extend your sustain in a fight. If you don't have access to Librum of Grace, you can just use pretty much any Librum in its place that you're comfortable with. Maybe it's the Holy Light Librum, Flash of Light, or even just the PvP Librum for some extra resilience. Alright, so now for my favorite item in the history of World of Warcraft. Scrolls of Blinding Light. So this item, while it's not the item I value the most, I do not have access to the item that I think is actually best for Arena for Paladin, and I'll talk about that in a second. But scrolls, if you do have them, a lot of Paladins do that played Classic. It was a drop from BWL, so it's the BWL tier Trinket for Paladins. So this gives you just like a crazy amount of haste on use, right? And so what's so good about that is all of our heals as a Paladin, right, are hard cast, and you have to have your feet planted. And so pairing Scrolls of Blinding Light with a combination of like Bubble Scrolls, Divine Illumination, or Divine Illumination Scrolls just gives you a ton of throughput when you need it the most, right? So this could bail you out of several bad situations, whether that's you forgot to cast, right? Or you just like were dispelling way too much, or whatever the situation is. So bottom line, scrolls can be a great offensive or defensive tool. It's a ton of haste. It can bail you out of almost any situation that you need to get some heals off rapidly. I typically line this up with just a bunch of Holy Lights, right, to just top off my warrior. But that brings us to an item that might be better, right? So if you did AQ 40, Visitus, he drops this item, which makes it pretty inaccessible. I never picked one up because it was actually bugged back in Classic, and I'm kind of kicking myself now, but this theoretically could be even better than Scrolls, just due to the shields that you would constantly be applying with your direct heals. And since Paladin direct heals are like such high values, right? Like you might Holy Light crit your warrior for 5 to 6, 7k healing, right? That would apply some pretty massive shields over time. And shields are like really strong in PvP. So I haven't had really a good opportunity to test this item outside of raids and PTR. So I'm not 100% confident in its usefulness in Arena, but it seems to me like this is kind of a sleeper OP trinket for Paladins. So if you have access to this item, I would highly recommend you test it out and see how it feels. So in general, I don't think it would be very good of me to not give any alternatives to classic trinkets. So given you don't have either of these items, maybe you're playing a Blood Elf or whatever your reason is for not having access to those, I think just about any other trinket that you're comfortable with will do. If you want to go the haste route, you could try Scarab of the Infinite Cycle. The only problem with this item, right, is that it's a proc rather than an on use. So you would kind of have to play around when the trinket procs for your healing burst windows. So it'd be just really RNG based on whether or not it's useful. I'd probably put that pretty low rated in terms of what you might use. Another kind of, I guess, honorable mention would be Pendant of the Violet Eye. If you're playing more sustained style, right, you can use this pretty frequently and it generates a lot of MP5. The downside to this is it's likely purgeable, right? So it's just a buff that you get and it can probably be dispelled pretty easily. Alternatively to that, just use a really strong healing power or spell power trinket to boost either your healing or damage if you're playing really offensively. There's trinkets that kind of have kind of a style similar to the ZHC or other DPS types trinkets are really good. Even some of the badge trinkets are good for dealing high burst or either damage or healing. So those are quite a few options. I think it's just whatever fits your playstyle the most. Okay, so now since I've talked about all the fringe pieces, I'm going to talk about set pieces. So I run one of two different setups. This first setup I'm going to talk about, I ran a lot in Season 1 just as we were learning So this is a lamellar setup that is really focused on the lowest possible Hammer of Justice cooldown we can get, right? So this pairs the Hammer of Justice talent, right? So improved Hammer of Justice. So if I switch to my template here, that reduces your Hodge by 15 seconds, paired with the set bonus of another 10 seconds. This is giving you like 35-second Hodges, right? So this playstyle is extremely aggressive, right? So you're basically coming right out the gate. You start hodging, CCing, and pressuring teams because you're gonna kind of try and kill on that second hodge of the game. So this is a pretty interesting setup. You can really wear whichever pieces fit you best in terms of 4-set. You just want 4-set. I'm wearing 4-set. I would wear 5-set if I was not wearing Justice Bringer, and I talked about that earlier in the video, that being good with human. So really the whole point of this build is high burst damage. You can see that I actually have spell power enchanted on my legs, as well as spell power and crit on my shoulders, and even some spell power gymming in there as well. So the main downfall of running Lambler, right, is you have like no mana, no regen, you're all burst, and you're all about that Hodge cooldown. So you and your warrior need to do the best that you can to close out the game early. So this is kind of a cheesy gear setup, but it can be very successful. We actually hit Duelist last season playing this build. It definitely has its limitations in terms of long-term games. You kind of have to close the game out if you don't get that burst window and kill the enemy opponent, the enemy healer, whatever. You're likely to lose the game. But that in general is kind of one of the two setups that I've ran. I've played this build up to about 2200 rating, and it kind of holds up. So after describing that lamellar build piece, let's talk about what I'm running now, right? So as we started to get higher and higher in rating, pushing that 2300 mark, the lamellar stuff just like wasn't working as well, right? And we needed to be able to play a little bit of a sustainment game. And so that led to me transitioning to 2-piece ornamented with 2-piece Crystal Forge. So what is the reason behind this? Well, really the 2-piece ornamented isn't so much about the healing gear, although you can see that I have enchanted my legs for healing instead of damage. It's really about just getting a resilience bonus. And then the other piece of this is running the Crystal Forge. And so I'm running 2-set Crystal Forge to reduce my Judgment mana costs. And it may not seem like a big reduction in 50 mana, but really the point is that I judge a lot every game. Because we play this hyper aggressive style, and like I'm always in the other healer's face or whatever it may be. And so anything that I can do to save mana is a huge bonus, and you'll even see some MP5 gymming there. So this has turned out pretty well. I tend to like to buy the gloves as a piece for this just to get that extra 2% flash of light crit. And this is kind of what we've been using to push beyond 2300. And so far, we're still kind of playing around with what is the best style for this. I'm sure I'll be coming up with some videos in the future about that. So since this video is already getting pretty long, I just figured I'd give a look at the other pieces that I have, just like doing around the world of my gear, right? So Justice Bringer specs, that pendant of the Lost Ages for the amulet effect. Crystal Forge shoulders. These are actually kind of gemmed for PvE. I just use them in arena as well. If I got an additional set, I'd probably change the gems on those to be a little bit more arena friendly. Stainless Cloak of Pure Hatred, so you can get this off the final boss in Karazhan. Crystal Forge chest piece that's gemmed for PvP to activate my meta gem and my helmet. And then running Marshall's Lamellar bracers. The only reason I'm running Lamellar here is I'm just too lazy to farm honor to buy the ornamented pieces for the season, and it's kind of a minimal upgrade. So Light's Justice, this is just boils down to I haven't had enough points and or luck to get the Bash Hammer or the Merciless Hammer for this season. I should be getting that pretty soon. Gladiator's Redoubt, this is actually best for both PvE and PvP, so have that. We talked about Libram of Grace. I like the ornamented gloves for the 2% flash of light bonus, 9 vulns just OP. Ornamented leg plates with the healing spell thread. It's pretty good. It's just the reason I like to choose this piece in the ornamented is maybe a little bit more nuanced than it appears. The leg piece actually has the most plus healing of any of the ornamented PvP pieces. So if you're going to run a combination of tier gear and ornamented, this is probably the best 2 items to buy. Veterans Lamellar Greaves, again, just haven't had the willpower to farm honor for the ornamented Greaves. Then I'm running Veterans Band of Salvation, Naru Lightwarden's Band. You can pretty much use any combination of a PvE band and PvP band. And then, of course, our trinkets with Medallion of the Alliance. Alright, so let's talk talents real quick, right? So, a lot of these talents are pretty standard. Probably the most peculiar set of talents, right, is my protection tree. So, since we change auras a lot and we can't rely on always running Devo, I just take Readout plus it's really good. Anytime that you block an attack, say whether that's a Mortal Strike or whatever it is, that could be pretty huge in a match. So since we're not always casting, that gives us a lot of chance to end up blocking something. So I think this is a really valued talent. In the second tier, we're gonna pretty much always take Guardian's Favor. Just the low Blessing of Freedom and Blessing Protection cooldowns, just too good. Then we're going to take Precision, and you may wonder why. Really, I just think that the 3% spell hit is worth it for how much we judge in this composition. The warrior's ability to kill a target is often very dependent on our ability to keep up judgments, so I really value this talent. In the next row, I'd say Kings. It's kind of unnecessary because I don't really use it. You could fill that talent probably wherever you want. A point into toughness or wherever. 1 point into shield specialization just to increase the amount of damage absorbed by our shield. Really, I'd probably reallocate that King's talent here. Improve Righteous Fury. This is pretty critical. Even though it does get purged a lot, if you do manage to keep it up, it reduces a lot of damage. And then this final tier here, right? So this is really dependent on whether or not you have the neck piece or not. If you don't have the neck piece, you want to take Improved Concentration Aura. If you do have the neck piece, you can actually afford to go 2 of 2 Stoicism and also 3 of 3 Improved Hammer of Justice. And so that's why that neck is so valued, is it just like really gives you 2 sets of talents that are super strong for PvP. The Holy Tree itself is just like Giga standard, right? So we're going to take Intellect because we're healing. We're going to take Spiritual Focus because we don't want spell pushback. We're going to take Healing Light because we want to increase the amount of our heals. We're going to take Unyielding Faith because we're playing PvP and we want a chance to resist fear and disorient. Illumination, we need that to help us sustain mana. Blessing of Wisdom is the blessing we're going to use on ourselves the most, so we want that to be improved. Divine Favor is really key in giving us a cheeky Holy Shot crit or just giving us a powerful heal on demand. Sanctified Light just gives a spell crit, which is really good for healing. And then also having some additional critical effect chance for your holy spells as far as holy power goes is pretty much in the same vein as Sanctified Light. And then Holy Shock, this is one of our best spells that we have, even though it does have a super long cooldown. It is so good for making offensive plays. Light's Grace is actually really important since we do Holy Bomb or Holy Light Bomb our partner a lot. Having that reduced cast time is really useful. Holy Guidance is also super good since we do stack a lot of intellect. It just increases our passive spell damage and healing by a lot. And then Divine Illumination is probably our best spell that we have to sustain during a fight, since we can pop this spell or talent to line up with our greatest burst window of healing. Say that we need to just cast Holy Light over and over again. This saves you a lot of mana in the long run. And that's why I take this talent. I know there's like a lot of builds out there that try and like skip over some of these last two pieces of holy to do something wonky. I wouldn't recommend it, but this is what I run. This video turned out being a gear and talent overview. I'll upload some videos detailing the ins and outs of different comps soon. In the meantime, let me know what comps you're struggling with against the most, and I'll compile videos to try and help you out. Thanks for watching.